I mean, Cyriac is really a worthwhile winner. So we have known each other for quite a long time. I think we first met in person when we were CEO of Shopkick in 2009 in Palo Alto. And then we saw each other again in I had to look it up, in 2017. So we were on the same stage in Cologne at the Köln Arena, so really big venue, and we're talking about Silicon Valley. And afterwards, Cyriac asked me, so what are you working on? And I said, well, I'm doing a story about startups that are trying to detect cancer via liquid biopsy. And he said, well, that's something I'm working on, but a very different way. And it's really interesting, but I can't talk about it right now. And so give me some time. I said, well, if you are talking to a journalist, I want to be the first one. And he really kept his word. So he was calling me in, I think, January last year. And we talked at length about early, what he's doing there. And I've been a journalist for over 30 years. And it's still one of my favorite stories. It's so exceptional on so many levels because it's usually the material is what Hollywood movies are made of. So you have a very dedicated founder, you have a genial inventor with a very terrific idea, you have death, you have love. I mean, a tragic outcome for your co-founder. Yet it might be a way to basically battle cancer and to find a cure. And I talked to many of your advisory board members and was quite impressed because it's basically the who is who in cancer, who is on this board. So before we talk about early Cyriac, can you talk a little bit about how you came to the United States? I know you grew up in Germany, then you went to McKinsey, which usually leads to a top job in the industry. Yet you decided to go to California. So why did you do that?
Well, I kind of failed coming to California. Actually, I was trying to get to California in 1999 already because I had been here before when we did this book thing and we were interviewing 100 software companies around the world, which was basically like a free ticket to talk to all these cool places. And when I touched down here, I could sort of smell it in the air. Literally smell it in the air. There's something different about the smell here. I think it's like the pine trees or whatever. And I connected this like subconsciously with entrepreneurship. And so I felt like this is the place to be. And then I said, okay, I think I'm gonna go with McKinsey to the Palo Alto office. So I applied for a permanent transfer, which means no return ticket, you stay there. And it was approved, which was great. And then 3 months before moving, I quit McKinsey. So I never made it. And I did that because at the time I said that if the right people show up in an idea I believe in, I will drop anything I do and I'll start a company. So that's what happened, and we started it in Munich. And that was OneToSnap, the company that Kai was talking about earlier, which was a crazy and terrible idea, by the way. But we did it anyway. And that's usually how it starts.
Yeah, and I have to mention that you got a great education, so you studied business and engineering at the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology. So we have Esther here today from Kittling, and she urged me to mention that. So how important was that education?
Well, you know, I have to admit that I'm not a very good student. I kind of suck at it. You know, I always try to get good grades and everything, but I never actually fully identify with the college way, or, you know, so I tended to sleep during the day and work at night, which I was a radio host at Radio Regenbogen in Mannheim, don't forget. So I was actually very interested in journalism. I think I told you this before. Yeah. By the way, this is one of the best journalists from Germany that I know. Hands down.
Yes, yes.
And I want to say this, and I'm not saying this just because he's sitting here. I read his story in 1998, and this was the time when, you know, all these little startups popped up and everybody thought it was the world was taken over. But you need a lens and a filter to identify what the really interesting companies are. So there was this article in Wirtschaftswoche, and of course I read it every week, and it was always Matthias Hohensee from Silicon Valley. And he was writing the story about this company that had jacuzzis and massage chairs and otherwise was doing a little coding on the side. And that startup was called Google. And he thought that this was going to be a game changer and a world-changing place. And I asked him, like many years later, when I finally had the honor to meet this man, whether he bought stock in Google. And he said, no, I wouldn't be here if I had. So I'm not sure why you didn't do that. But you are writing stories about the right places, and I appreciate that, and thank you for it. Yeah. And I never answered your question.
Actually, a friend of mine, I told him to buy Apple, and I think he is still thankful because he bought in 1999. But let's get back to you because we are still spending up in the evening. So, talking about Shopkick, that was an early pioneer in e-commerce. Why did you decide to sell the company, I think for $250 million instead of scaling it up?
Yeah, so we sold the company because it was really very, very difficult to convince retailers to do the right thing for themselves. It sounds weird, but it's really true. The consumers loved it. Just for you guys, just in a second, what it is. It's a shopping app that rewards you with bonus points simply for being physically present without buying a thing. So you just walk into a Target, Best Buy, Macy's, you take out your phone, you open it up, open the app, and then you get points. The points turn into gift cards. And you can earn points at Walmart and spend them at Target, although they're competitors, and vice versa. And they turn into gift cards when you choose whatever you want. You can turn it into a Target or an Amazon gift card, whatever you want. And it was extraordinarily difficult, although we could prove that every person who joined Shopkick would spend 80% more in dollars at the participating stores. Proven by credit cards and the whole thing. Visa was our partner, they did a fantastic job. And nevertheless, it was extraordinarily hard to convince them to do this. And you would think, like, why in the world would they not do that? Because foot traffic is the #1 problem in physical retail. Once you get them through the door, you stand a very good chance of making a sale. Conversion rates online are 1 to 3%. If you're lucky, you're at Amazon, you reach 8, 9, you never top 10. In physical retail, watch yourself next time when you walk in. What's the chance you walk out without anything? It is 20% in fashion. That's the conversion rate. They think they are terrible because 80% don't buy. In electronics, it's 50%. In grocery, it's 90%. And at McDonald's and Starbucks, it's 99% because you don't walk into McDonald's and figure out you don't like hamburgers. So in other words, getting them through the door is the key thing. And nevertheless, and the reason why we sold it was because we had done this for 6 years. We had 20 million users. We drove $1 billion in sales for our partners per year. But I couldn't see the next 200 or 2,000 large retailers to join and say, we're going to do this, it's going to get massive. And because of that, it was time to hand it over and then find the next thing to do.
So you sold it for $250 million, so we have a very, very successful entrepreneur, great network here in Silicon Valley, a lot of knowledge in software and internet. So one would assume that the next thing would also be internet and software. Yet you picked a very different thing this early. So can you elaborate why you did that?
It's a very simple answer. I made an important decision. In 2016 I left, and I wanted to take 2 years off. And it was awesome the first 4 months. Angel and I packed up our little micro children and we went to China. We were in Beijing and then in Shenzhen for a whole month, and the whole purpose of the trip was to understand Chinese startup entrepreneurs. And so I ended up meeting everyone from very large companies that were already worth $20 billion at the time. The founder, Wang Xing, for those who know Meituan, it's now worth over $100 billion, and it's public. And spent a Saturday morning having breakfast with an incredibly interesting person, but all the way to people who had never had an idea and they were trying to start a company at some internet cafe. There's an internet alley in Beijing because the government decides this is important, so there's an internet alley, of course. And so then you sit in the cafe and there are these people, and one of the guys would have developed a new electric engine for a car by himself that was 4 times less weight than Tesla's engine. So there was a deep learning curve. So then it was great. Came back, went to Europe, to Germany and other places. And then when I came back, it was around 6 months later, and I became really unhappy. Because I felt like this early retirement thing was really not for me. And I made the decision on the spot that I would never retire again. And I might work a little less in the future, but I will not retire, because it's actually kind of boring. And the worse than that, it's not just boring, you feel kind of useless. One of the worst feelings for me is when I feel like a consumer. The word, think about the word.
Perfect.
It means you're consuming.
Yes.
You're taking in and you're not giving anything out. It's really remarkably bad. And so then I had this downturn, and I was trying to listen to myself, what I want to do. And I made an important decision to follow my heart and not my mind. Because my mind would have told me to do the next commerce thing, internet thing, as you just said, right?
Exactly.
Mobile. I've been working on mobile for 20 years. I love cell phones for many, many reasons. But I didn't want to do the next thing. The kind of the wave was over. And then I decided to follow my heart. And my heart drew me into science. I'm not a scientist. I'm the clueless guy in the room. My dad is a physicist, but I'm not a scientist. And because I studied engineering and business in one integrated Wirtschaftswoche program in Germany, I know neither business nor engineering, because obviously it's not going very deep. So I don't really know anything. And it's not actually just humble bragging. I really just don't know a lot of stuff. So I decided to follow my heart anyway, and my heart drew me to science because I think the ultimate driver of progress in this world is 2 things. It is societal progress by having the right mindset. We see this right now, democracies versus authoritarian regimes. We see it all over the world. And the other one is progress through innovation. And innovation is driven by science. That's where the true progress lies. And engineering is the application of scientific insights into practice.
And I remember you told me that you went to Stanford and you were looking for the best idea.
Yeah.
So can you describe what you did?
Right. So I basically just started watching what I was reading when nobody asked me to read anything. And what I was reading was very different things. One was brain-to-machine interfaces. And I ended up helping a guy sitting in a dilapidated building in Berkeley shooting microwaves at his own head, trying to decipher his own thoughts, which was very interesting, to say the least, but probably 20 years out, too early. And then I looked at consumer robots, which I think will be an absolute standard in 20 years from today. It will be very strange not to have a robot in your house with an attitude, otherwise it's not very interesting. Really, truly, I think it's not very. It would be like not having a robot would be like not having a washing machine today. The problem with that is the cost curves don't align between software and hardware, and it will take a dramatic amount of AI and data combined with hardware. There are only 2 firms that come to mind today that can do this. It's Tesla and Apple.
You should talk to the CEO of Nito. He is over there.
Oh, yeah, that would be interesting. And the third thing that I looked at was engineering meets biology and software. Think about this for a moment. Engineering meets biology and software. I believe the intersection of those 3 things are going to be one of the 2 main drivers of innovation in the future, in the next 30, perhaps even 50 years. The other one is AI, because as we're moving towards general AI, it's going to change the world. But biology is not what we used to think biology is. Biology meets engineering and software is at the stage today that computer science was in the 1950s and 60s, when for the first time we saw software and hardware to unbundle. And one day, you know, now you can write software on a piece of chip, and somebody realized it a little earlier, and by IBM said, "Oh, we'll do the hardware, the software is uninteresting, it's boring." And then this guy said, "Okay, I'm going to do that for you, don't worry about it." That was Bill Gates. So now, fast forward to today, you've got this situation that for the first time we're starting to decode. We know the letters of life, right? We know there are 4 letters, and they keep repeating in endless permutations. And if you found the genome of the human life, it would be a massive, massive book with thousands and thousands of pages of 4 letters that keep permutating. The problem is, it's like finding a book with hieroglyphs from 4,000, 5,000 years ago. We know the letters, but we don't know the grammar or the vocabulary. So that means we can read the code, but we can't understand the code. And in the next 10, perhaps 20 years, not longer, because of AI and because of very crude experiments, where it's very crude, I'm intentionally simplifying, so forgive me. But it's like having a huge book, and right now all we do is tear a page out and see what happens to the story, if the people are still alive or dead in the end, right? I'm intentionally exaggerating, but you get the point. We know very, very little about the grammar and the vocabulary. But the more often we do that, the more often we learn little things, right? And then all of a sudden AI comes into the game. And AI is watching this. It says, if I do this, that happens, that happens, that. And AI is a lot better at pattern recognition than anybody here in the room. So that means one day, and this is going to be really interesting, you know how exponential curves look?
Yeah.
They look like this. They're totally flat. And you think like, and this is why big companies always miss the small companies, because they look like they're not going anywhere. But in reality, they are on an exponential growth trajectory. And one day, it takes off so much that nobody can catch it anymore. And that's precisely what's going to happen with understanding what I call the language of life. Mm-hmm. And once we know the language of life, we can not only read the book, we can not only alter the book with CRISPR, which we already have today, we can write the book, which means we can write entirely new life forms. Mm-hmm. And all of that is going to happen, whether we like it or not, by the way, in the next 30 years.
You're very passionate, Cyriac. I could listen hours to you. We have a limited time. So,
sorry, running out of time.
Yeah. Let's get too early.
Yeah.
So, how did you discover early? And I think your lovely wife Angel played an important role that you basically found the company. So, can you tell how you found it?
Yes. So I have to be a little shorter. So the story is this. I was very frustrated, and I had my down point, and that was on Thanksgiving Day of 2016, because Thanksgiving to me means the year is over and nothing is happening anymore except Christmas. So I was sitting there and I was reflecting the year, and I was thinking it was great in China and everything, but I really accomplished nothing. I learned something, sure, but I haven't gotten anywhere with my quest to find the next thing. And then Angel walks into the room with a magazine in her hand, and she says, "Cyriac, there's this story about precision health," and that's sort of what I've been talking about, that combines these 3 disciplines. And she said, "I think you may want to read this." And the only reason why this physical, of all things, magazine came to our house was because we weren't in our own house. We were subleasing somebody else's house because our own house was being remodeled, and we were reading their magazine. And it was Stanford Medical School's magazine that they sent out, and we were not on the distribution list for some reason. So I got this thing, and I read the story, and the story was called "And Yet You Try." I encourage everybody to look up the story, because it is terrific.
It's a great story, yeah.
It is a story about Sam Gambier, one of the most brilliant scientists in early cancer detection in the world, one of the top 2 or 3 people, and how he lost his only child to cancer while he was searching for a way to detect cancer earlier. And I read this story and I was really shaken by it. And I sent an email, a cold email to Sam that day, and I said, it is not a coincidence, I'm sending you this email on Thanksgiving Day. I can only imagine how hard this is for you today on a holiday. I read your story, I felt a gripping sense of grief, because although I don't even know your son, and yet I was also very inspired by the work you're doing. I'm not a scientist, I'm not a biologist, I'm a serial entrepreneur, I'm looking to build my next thing, I'd like to meet you.
So you met him and he lived in Portola, right?
He was a neighbor, and I didn't know. He lived in Portola Valley, 4,000 people, you know. So we went on a Saturday morning and we had breakfast for 3 hours at the local Portola Kitchen restaurant. And soon after, I found myself sitting at his kitchen table every other Saturday morning and was trying to teach me biology, largely in vain, but I give him credit for trying. And then he connected me to a bunch of people at Stanford, and I talked to all these people, which is what you were referring to. And everyone who I met was telling me that they were working on the world's most important idea.
Of course.
But by definition, everyone except one was wrong. Probably all of them. But because I'm not a biologist, I didn't know who. So that was really frustrating. And the problem is this: when you start a company, there is an ocean of good ideas out there. And I'm probably able to distinguish between bad and good ideas. But I'm not able to distinguish between good, very good, and outstanding ideas because I'm not a biologist. And only outstanding ideas are worth pursuing. So, and then I got lucky when this article came, and I met Sam, and Sam sent me to all these people, and I still couldn't find it. And then I went back to him and I said, Sam, I still haven't found it. May I ask you a simple question? You've seen hundreds of ideas in your own lab, outside of your own lab. Which one has the highest potential of all? And he looked at me in his scientist underselling type of way, and he said, there is this one idea that I believe has some real potential. And that became early.
And that was actually Sam's idea. I talked to a lot of people, to some Nobel Prize winners even, and to the co-founder of Moderna, he is on your board as well, who said it was just an exceptional idea out of this world. Can you describe the idea? So you're looking for biomarkers like everybody else does, but you're doing it in a very different way. Can you explain that?
Yeah, it's a very different idea. So I should say that a lot of people are trying to find cancer early. And there is a very interesting technology called liquid biopsies. You take a blood sample out of your body, like a 8 milliliter sample, out of 5 liter blood volume, and you try to find fragments of cancer DNA in the blood, which might help you to find that you have cancer. It's a very elegant, beautiful idea. The problem is that in practice it's extremely hard. So the earlier the cancer is, the less shedding there is from the cancer. If there's less shedding, you may not find anything because there may be nothing to begin with. So with the best AI, you still can't find anything if nothing is in the sample, right? So Sam was on the advisory board of some of the biggest liquid biopsy firms, and he got very frustrated with the pace of innovation. And so he flipped the question around, and he said, what if we could stop searching for cancer altogether? What if instead of searching for cancer, we could force the cancer to reveal itself? Completely different, orthogonal thinking. And so then I said, so this is really interesting, but how do you do that? And he went off on this thing, and I still can't catch myself today when I hear this. He said, imagine you could get an injection, or one day maybe even swallow a pill. And it releases a vector, which is like think of it as a cargo container. And that disperses through your body, and it enters healthy cells randomly, and if you happen to have cancer cells, it will also randomly enter those. But only if it's a cancer cell. It will force the cancer to produce a non-human synthetic biomarker that doesn't belong in the human body. For example, limonene. Limonene is in oranges, not in humans, unless you eat them. And if you haven't eaten an orange, but you're exhaling limonene, you might have cancer, because the cancer was forced to make limonene. Now, suspend disbelief for a moment, imagine this worked. You still haven't solved the problem, because now you might actually get an exhaler of cancer or limonene indicators, but you can't see the tumor because it's too small.
Yeah.
Or you don't know if it's malignant or benign, then what are you going to do except sending the person home to worry about having cancer? That's not very helpful. So now the next step kicks in. This time we force the cancer to produce an enzyme that eats up a radioactive PET tracer that has been injected in the body. And it traps the radioactive tracer inside a tumor that's normally too small to image. And all of a sudden you can see that small tumor that's not visible normally.
And you know exactly where it is, right?
Now you know where it is.
Yeah.
And now that you know where it is, you can actually do something about it, because now you can use surgery or precision radiation to take it out. And in the future, you may even be able to use the early platform itself to force the tumor to produce its own toxin and kill itself, or activate the immune system to do the rest.
And you have already proven it in, I think, mice and dogs. So you're working on in human trials as well in Australia. Is that still ongoing?
Yeah, it's still ongoing. We started the company in 2018, so it's in June, so it's almost 4 years now. And when we started the company, we told our investors that, Andreessen Horowitz, that we want to be in humans within 3 years. And they chuckled and they said, "That's good luck," because I heard that any time. And then we decided, okay, let's actually peel back the onion, because we were only at mouse stage at the time, and Stanford gave us the concept. It took us over half a year to just replicate the findings before everything is fine-tuned. But we said, actually, if we want to do this in 3 years, let's reverse engineer this thing and think about, why do people not make it in 3 years? Why does it normally take 6 or 7 years? And the two things that stuck out were, number one, something we call the mousetrap. The mousetrap is, you go to a startup in biotech and you say, when are you going to be in humans? And the answer will be 2 years from now. And 2 years later you go back and say, when are you going to be in humans? And the answer will be 2 years from now. And the reason why is because they keep iterating in mice, because there's always something you need to do better, right? So it's really hard to cut the cord and say, no, I'm taking this imperfect thing and I'm going to bring it to humans now. So you got to cut the cord at some point and say, I'm taking this thing. And by the time you're injecting it into humans, you are cringing because you know you have something much better already in mice. But you got to do that. So the second reason is that approval cycles with the FDA take quite some time. They can take between 1 to 2 years before you're even allowed to start your trial. So we started thinking about that. If that takes so long, how can we do this differently? So we went to China and found out that in China, things are faster, but you can't actually export the data very easily, so that's not very good. Then we looked at the Cayman Islands, figured out there are not a lot of people living there. Then we went to the Netherlands and found out it's faster but not fast enough. And then we went to Australia and found it's really fast and really professional. So in Australia, the approvals happen at the local level, not at the government level. There's an ethics committee that decides about new trials. And then you can start recruiting. And there are 30 million people living in the country that are highly educated, very diverse in ethnicities and backgrounds, and a very, very strong clinical standard that is approved, accepted by the FDA and everything. So we set up a 100% owned subsidiary in Australia and found clinics that want to work with us in Melbourne and in Sydney. And we dosed our first patient 3 years and 2 weeks after we started the company.
And then COVID happened, right?
Yeah, that happened, then COVID happened and everything shut down and we were wonderfully fast getting into the first patient and then nothing happened after that. So then we fought against COVID shutdowns because it so happens that Australia takes COVID a little more seriously than America. And Melbourne was literally the most shut down city in the world for 4 months. So that was kind of the unlucky side of things. So now we're trying to battle that by adding more clinics, by having press in Australia, by having third parties help us acquire patients. And now we're finally starting to move quite well. Whether it's all going to work, just to be clear here, this is not even, I was just saying it to Werner, this is not even a moonshot, it's kind of a Mars shot that we're doing. But the beautiful thing is, if it does work, it is going to change everything. Because I don't think there's a single person in the world who is not either affected by cancer or knows someone affected by cancer. We could change everything with it, so it's worth doing.
So can you make a prediction? If everything goes according to plan, can you make a prediction when we are going to see that in the market, when the patient can actually take a pill and detect if he has a cancer and where?
Yeah, my co-founder would kill me for even mentioning the pill because it will never happen, ever. But the injection, let's go with that.
Okay.
So I think that it will hopefully work for the first time to bring it to market in 2026, maybe 27, something like that. So we don't want to have 15-year horizons like most companies. We're trying really hard to push this forward. And I should say, I don't know if people may not know this in this room, but this beautiful co-founder, I have two co-founders. One is our Chief Scientific Officer, David Sui, who's an amazing gene therapy expert. I think you talked to him as well. And the other one is Sam Gambier that I mentioned, and he died from cancer himself 2 years ago.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that because I think that's so ironic in the tragedy of the story that Sam not only lost his son, Milan, who died of a brain tumor was 16, but he, an expert in early detection of cancer, actually got cancer and was not aware of it until it was too late. So what encouraged you to continue? So you basically, your co-founder is dead, and there's this terrific idea. So some people would have said, okay, that's the end. So the original inventor is not here anymore. Also a trusted advisor. What encouraged you to continue?
I think, I know you're not supposed to do that, but I'm going to answer with a counter question, if I may. How can I not do that?
Good question.
Yeah.
But still, it takes a lot of courage to do that.
This person was so special. He was not only a brilliant scientist, one of the best. He was so brilliant that his magazine in his field, he was the molecular imaging expert in the world, right? That magazine is a 50-year-old scientific magazine that comes out every month, has never had a person on its cover in its history. Until Sam died, they put him on the cover. So that's who he was. And yet he was an even better person. An even better human being than that. I was sitting in his bedroom. I was very fortunate. I became very close with him. And he was not even allowing his assistant of 20 years to visit him in his bedroom when he had no hair anymore. And I was sitting there with him and talking about life. So there is no question that we're going to try everything possible to make this thing fly. And if it's not going to work, it's not because we tried not hard enough. It's because we freaking ran out of money, and that's the only reason that would happen.
I think we have people here in the room with money. Are you fundraising at the moment? I'm just asking.
I don't think there's a single person in the room who is going to give a biotech company money at this point in time. Look at the market this morning.
Unfortunately, yeah.
So this is the problem, right? When you go for a Mars shot or a moon shot, you are dependent on significant amounts of dollars. We've raised 20 million in our seed round and 40 million after. We've raised $60 million so far. But that's far away from what we need to keep going and build this out, right? So that's the problem. You're taking a massive risk that you're simply going to run out of cash. So you got to be really careful how you plan the milestones to show proof. And one of our best hopes in this whole process, believe it or not, are not humans, it's dogs. Because dogs are an incredibly useful intermediate between mice and humans. Because when you think about mice are 30 grams in body weight, and a dog is between 300 to 1,300 times heavier. And from there to a human, it's only 2 to 9x. The scaling factor is really small from a dog to a human. They can be between 10 to 45 kilograms, some of them even more. And in addition to that, Dogs develop spontaneous cancers, unfortunately, like humans. In fact, more than humans. There's 6 million dogs in the US every year that develop cancer. And their pet owners are very passionate about helping them, so they bring them to the clinic. So they are our patients. We work with UC Davis and 3 other clinics that are doing that, veterinary clinics. And they have an immune system, while mice have to be immunocompromised in order to inject 50-year-old immortal cell lines, cancer cell lines, into their body so they won't be rejected by the mice. They're human lines, so they have to be immunocompromised. So they're very artificial models. So dogs might help us. Once again, the road less traveled in biotech is to help us to accelerate and not run a human trial every 3 years, but a dog trial every 3 months.
So the first product could be for a dog, an injection to...
Maybe, but the ultimate goal is to get this faster into humans by having dogs in the middle.
Understand. Okay, unfortunately we are running out of time. I could talk to hours to you, and very easy for an interviewer because really it's a joy to listen to you and to hear the passion you're having, and I wish you the best of luck and the best of success, not only for you but also for mankind.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you all.